In this lesson, we will understand what is meant by the area of a polygon, as well as calculate the area of rectangles. So here's a picture of a rectangle, where the bottom is 3 inches and the height is 2 inches. Well, the bottom we'll call the base. So we have the base is 3 inches and the height is 2 inches. And our objective is to find both the area and the perimeter. Now area, a way to think of this is if we were to put squares in here, where each square is 1 inch by 1 inch. So here is one square that is 1 inch in length and then 1 inch in height. Okay, and then we have another square with the same dimensions, and then a third one, and then a fourth one, fifth one, and then we have a sixth one right here. So the way to think through area is if we were to fill up each shape, in this case the rectangle, with squares that are 1 by 1, whether it be inches or feet or whatever, it's 1 unit by 1 unit long. And then the question is how many of those squares will fill up the rectangle. And that would be your area. So notice there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares. And so when we find the area, we would say that we have 6 square inches, or inches squared, same thing. Well, the question is, how do we find the area based off just the numbers? So instead of filling them up with squares and then counting, is there a quicker way to get to that area? Well, notice if I take the 3 and multiply it by the 2, we're going to have 6 square inches. And that is the shortcut that we can use. For the rectangle, the area, we can take the base and multiply it by the height. So in this case, we would take 3 times 2, which would give me 6 square inches. And then the perimeter, by definition, is the distance around the shape. Meaning if I were to add up this 3 inches plus the 2 inches plus this other 3 inches on the top and then 2 inches for the side, 2 inches for the side, add those all together, that will give me the perimeter. So we see we have 3 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2. We add those together and we are going to get 10 inches. So 10 inches would be my perimeter. Now the question is, how can we find 10 inches without having to count like that? Maybe there's a little quicker way to do this. Well, notice with the rectangle, the top and the bottom will be the same. So if we take 2 of the bases, so 2 of the bottoms, we would have 2 3s, which is what we have in this case. We have 2 3s, and then if we can add in the height, but we have 2 of those heights. We have one on the right and one on the left. So we're adding a 2 here and a 2 here. So we have 2 heights. So if we add the 2 bases plus the 2 heights, that would give me the perimeter of the rectangle. So the perimeter formula is you can take 2 bases plus 2 heights. So using the formula, what you would do is you would plug in a 3 for the base. So we have 2 3s, and then plug a 2 in for the height. So we have 2 2s. We add those together and we would get 10 inches. By the way, take note of the units for the area and the perimeter. So the perimeter, you're measuring the distance around the rectangle. So imagine taking a ruler or a tape measure and measuring the linear distance around this rectangle. Okay, that is one dimensional, right? Distance is one dimensional. So we have 10 inches, and you can think of that as to the first power. So it's one dimensional, so we have inches to the first power. Whereas the area is accounting for 2 dimensions. We have the base and the height incorporated. And so we're accounting for both dimensions, the base and the height in this case, and figuring out how much area is inside of that. So because that is 2-dimensional now, you would raise inches to the second power. So 2-dimensional, raise inches to the second power. 1-dimensional, raise the units to the first power. And now we have a picture of a square. A square is a type of rectangle, so the same formulas would apply for squares as they would rectangles. However, we could use a little different approach to this because a square has sides that are the same length. So we can maybe do this a little quicker, and we're going to work through that. So a square, you have the base and the height are the same. And they're both 2 inches in this case. Now imagine once again filling this up with squares that are 1 by 1 unit. So it's 1 inch in length and 1 inch in height. If we fill this up with squares, we would have 4 squares. So the area, we would say, is 4 square inches. Now, using the formula, we have area equals base times height. And that formula applies for squares because a square is a type of rectangle. But notice the base and the height are the same. So instead of taking base times height, because they're the same, what I can do is I can say, okay, we know one side is 2 inches. So if we take the side times another side, that's going to give me the area of the square. So instead of base times height, we can think of this as side times side, or side squared. So the area of a square, we could use the base times height, or we can think of this as side squared. So we know one side is 2 inches, so we take 2 squared, or 2 times 2, which would give me 4 inches squared, or 4 square inches. And then the perimeter, we have 4 sides all the same, 2 inch, 2 inch, 2 inch, and then 2 inches here. If we have 4 sides that are the same, the perimeter is just adding those together. So instead of adding 4 2's, we can take 4 times 2. And in general, we would say it's 4 times the side length. So in this case, we have 4 times 2, which would be a perimeter of 8 inches. And that concludes our lesson for today. We will see you next time.